I'm Colin Reid, a fan of Manfred Mann's Earth Band. Last week, while I was on holiday in the UK, I caught up with Mick Rogers to make an interview recording where we discussed his past career and his plans for the future. So without further ado, here's the interview I made with Mick last week. Mick, it's fantastic to have you down here in Alderholt in Dorset.
Nice to be here. It's great.
That's fantastic. Look, I know you've got a lot of interesting things coming up in the near future. Mm-hmm. You have your new tour coming out starting in April next year, starting in Oslo. And you have a new website, brand new website.
Yep. And
new music. I know you're working hard on making some new music.
Absolutely. Get back this afternoon, I'll be right at it tomorrow morning.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I think, if you don't mind, if we can have a little look back on your career.
Yeah.
As like a companion to the website that has your new biography. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could tell us how it all began for you with your family. Quite interesting that you have a family with a musical background.
Yeah, I mean, my dad was a drummer, semi-pro drummer, and my uncle was a bass player, guitarist. In fact, he was a really lovely bass player and a lovely guitarist. In fact, he was part of a concert at the Festival Hall in the 40s, you know, of Hawaiian music. He played Hawaiian steel and stuff like that. And he was giving lessons to people at home. Mm-hmm. He lived with us, you know, we all lived in the same house. And as many families did in the 40s, 50s, you know, save money that way. And I could see people coming in and having the odd guitar lesson. I thought, this seems good, you know. And then, like a lot of guys at my age, we heard Heartbreak Hotel from Elvis and stuff like that, and they all went, oh my God. It was like a life changer for us, just to hear that, you know, instead of Frank Sinatra and all those, and Perry Como and all those other people, you know, and the train runs through the middle of the house, you know, Doris Day and all that sort of thing. And it was such an amazing thing to be able to hear, because everything in those days, in the 50s, was like a first. You'd never heard it before.
Yes, I understand that.
And you talked to Cliff Richard, you talked to Richie Blackmore, Jeff Beck, and many more, Robert Plant and stuff. And they heard that and they went, oh my God. And then I discovered some earlier Elvis stuff that he did in '54, which eventually came out all on Sun Records, you know, before he signed to RCA. And that was the life changer for me. I knew what I wanted to do.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I was surrounded by the jazz thing as well, which is cool because it helped me later on, especially when I later on began working with Manfred. We're on the same thing there. We listened to the same people, Dave Brubeck and stuff. But I decided, and what happened was they were holding, excuse these sunglasses, but I got an eye infection here and I don't want everyone to see, which is great. And they were holding a talent contest where my dad's band played a place called the Cliff Pavilion, which was a well-known place in Dovercourt in Essex, where I lived. Okay. And I went down there one afternoon and I learned Mystery Train by Elvis, you know, and I can only sort of strum it. And I got on stage and I heard someone whisper, when I went on stage, this is Ted's kid. And Ted was my dad. You know, this is Ted's kid. You know, and it's funny how things like that stick out, you know. And I went into Mystery Train. And of course, I go, it just so happens I have a guitar. And in those days, I can only play, or probably not as good as that, was acoustic guitar on this big place. And off I went, you know. I won the talent competition and the prize, and when I tell Manfred and the guys this, they always laugh. There was a popular songstress of those days called Eve Boswell, and she was playing a summer season at the Cliff Pavilion, and I got to walk her dog around the block, you know, or on the seafront.
Right. Oh, fantastic.
And that made it to the front of the papers, you know. it didn't go down too well at school. They could see me walking this pink poodle. It wasn't very rockabilly, you know. And then I eventually, it was before I could play the guitar solo of Mystery Train. You know, and all that. I couldn't play that. So I did the guitar solo like. Oh man, it must have sounded awful, but I won the competition.
Yeah, so you did very well.
And that's when I knew what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
You know, it's not an ego thing, it was a musical thing. I thought this feels great to be on stage.
And finally you were recognised, weren't you? You had a family came to see one of the performances?
Yeah, I was playing at a place in Jaywick Sands, and I forget what the place was called, but it was a club in Jaywick Sands which my dad and my auntie played, because my auntie and uncle they had a band as well, so it really was a family thing. And I was playing there, and I was doing Frank Ifeld's "I Remember You," you know, and all that sort of thing, and shaking all over it. I had my spot, you know.
Yeah.
And this family came up to me afterwards, and I got to know them, and ended up moving in with them in Bromley in Kent, because they said, look, in those days there was no big motorway down to Essex and London. It was pretty much all small roads, you know. So they said, you're not gonna be sort of discovered down here. Move in with us in Bromley in Kent, and and then it snowballed from there. You know?
So how did you meet up with Adam Faith and his band?
Well, and about a year later, I had this band, which was like, in those days, everyone was a covers band. They didn't call it a covers band; it was just a band. It was just so happened that you didn't write your own stuff. That came much later, you know, unless you were really lucky, you know, or had someone who could really write. And in those days, I wasn't a great writer at all. I mean, I don't consider myself a great writer now, but, you know, other people like it, I don't care. So we had this band, and we called it Vision. And we were signed, you know, after doing pubs and small clubs and stuff like that. And the funny thing is, I used to go to gigs at Bromley, and I used to see Manfred Mann advertised playing Bromley South Jazz Club or something like that.
Yeah.
I thought, oh yeah, that's interesting. And then we were signed to a guy called Arthur Howes, who did tours with people like Adam Faith, Helen Shapiro, Chris Andrews, and some really bigger acts, you know, although Adam Faith was huge in those days. And we got to become his backing band, and did all those clubs, cabaret things, and we did a poll winners concert, which meant we played at Wembley. There's another story there, and that my mother worked in Woolworths on the sweet counter in Essex, you know, in Dovercourt, and she won a competition to go and see a concert. And it was must have been in 57, 58 or something like that. And she said, "Oh, I've won a competition to see this," you know. And I went, "Well, show me who you're going to see." Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent, you know, a band called The Hunters and stuff like that. And I went, "Are you sure? Eddie Cochran?" "Yeah, Ipswich Gormont." And I went, "Oh my God." She said, "You can come if you want." I mean, can you imagine? You know.
Yeah.
So I saw these guys live. Later on, I saw Cliff and the Shadows at the same venue. But I've got lots of rockabilly friends. And but they're older than me, so to speak. So when I say that I saw Eddie Cochran, they go, "Oh my God!"
Yeah.
And later on, I went with my mother, or my mother went with me. I'm not sure which way around it was, to see another poll winners concert, which featured all these guys, Cliff and the Shadows. Later on, it was the Beatles, Rolling Stones. Everyone was on the same show, and it was just incredible when you think about that now. You know.
You were very fortunate to have exposure like that, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so eventually, what was the sort of turning point that you decided to go to Australia?
The turning point was when the band Vision, we backed a guy called David Garrick, who had a record out, Dear Mrs. Appleby it was called, and we had our own spot, where our own spot on the show must have been about 10 minutes. And I got to sing River Deep, Mountain High, and some other blues thing that we were doing, you know, all rock thing. And on that show, it was Gene Pitney, Dozy, Mick and Titch, that band and stuff. I'm not sure if the Trogs are on that show or not, but because we toured with them as well. But it featured a big band from Australia with an amazing pop star, Normie Rowe, huge in Australia. And I thought, oh yeah, right, well, it's
So
like another world away. Yeah. But at the end of the tour, they saw me sing and stuff like that. And they said, our guitarist wants to come off the road, Rod, he wants to come off the road, he's not a road guy. So we'd like to, you know, have him meet with our manager with you and see if you'd like to do something with us, join the band. And I went, wow. I said, well, what does it entail? And he said, well, we start off at Expo 67 in Montreal. We're doing 2 weeks there. Okay. And then we go on to Hawaii. And then we go on to, I think we stayed in Fiji. That bit's a bit clogged up in my head. But then we went on to Melbourne to start the tour, which was supposed to be about a dozen gigs. And we ended up doing a massive tour of everywhere, you know. 1 minute we're doing stadiums, next minute we're playing in Waka Waka somewhere, you know, in a small place. But Normie was huge. I mean, he was the pop star.
So what age were you at that point? Was that you in your early 20s?
Well, it was 1967.
Oh.
And I was born in 46. Sorry, folks.
So you're in your early 20s at that stage.
Yeah. And that then led to, I mean, it was amazing. I mean, when they said about the tour and they said about, oh, we're going to this, we're going to that, I said, well, let me think about it. Yeah, I'll join. And it was great. We went into rehearsals and the band was really rocking. It was like the Playboys. It was really good.
But I understand that Normie Rowe got called up for national service.
He was called up for,
So that must have been a bit of a blow for you.
It was, but got together and we said, well, what are we going to do? And they said, well, let's form a band. It wasn't the kind of band that Graham Trotman, although he's a great drummer, it wasn't his kind of thing. So we went on to do something different with a guy called Craig Collins playing drums, who later joined Manfred Mann Chapter 3.
Yeah.
We then called it Procession. Jumping ahead, we did the first live album ever to be recorded in Australia, live at Sebastian's, it was called, which is one of our regular gigs, which was different. And what happened after that? So we eventually recorded this song called Anthem, which was a cappella. The instruments we made, the drums we did with our voices, you know, that sort of thing. It worked really well, and it was a hit, especially in Melbourne area. It was a hit in Oz, not so much in Sydney because we hadn't gone there yet, and you had to go to perform and stuff like that.
Sure. And
radio hadn't picked it up. Later it did, but. We also had another English guy in the band, Trevor Griffin, who went on to write Lovers Like Oxygen for Sweet. That was a big hit for him, yeah. Great organist. And Procession was a great band. It was kind of different to what everyone else was doing. Some thought we were quite snobbish when they approached us, you know, we're sort of, well, you know, we play proper music. No, those were the guys that were playing the proper music, you know. We were we were having a go.
Yeah,
you know.
sure.
But then we went to England, and our manager David Joseph got us signed to a major label, and that's when it really started to fall apart, because you never let the record company dominate what you do. I could never understand why they sign an artist, the first thing they do is try and change it. Mike Hugg was our producer, who was then the drummer with Manfred Mann. And he was kind of on our side. He said, well, we don't want to change it too much. But what they did is they took Anthem, the a cappella song, and put an orchestra on it.
Okay, so they changed it.
So what's the point in that? It doesn't end up an original idea anymore. It's something that anyone could have done.
But you played a lot of live concerts in England?
Didn't do enough, but we ended up with we did. Yeah, we did a club called, I think it was called the Revolution or something,
Okay.
And we're doing 40,000 headmen. You remember that?
Yeah.
40,000 headmen make me change your mind. We were doing that.
And this is the track you've got on your Back to Earth album.
Back to Earth album, because I love the song.
Right.
And I looked down in the audience, and there was Steve Winwood in the audience, and I've gone, because it was a Traffic song, and I've gone, oh my God. And he was just smiling, and he put his thumbs up, and because you can see the embarrassment, But he probably won't remember it. I do, and the guys in Procession probably do. But
and you played with the Yes as well, alongside Yes?
Not on the Revolution. We went on to the Marquee.
Okay.
And the main night of the week, funnily enough, was a Tuesday. I mean, I saw Cream there, and I saw lots of other bands, King Crimson, which was amazing. But Cream, I saw 3 times at the Marquee after they just come back from America as well, when they broke America. Can you imagine? What a great night. So. And then, we played Marquee on a Tuesday supporting Yes. And that was good. That was nice. The last gig was on a boat which only had one keel.
Okay.
And it was the last boat that was allowed to sail. If the keel broke, we'd have still been on it. You know what I mean? We'd have still been there in the middle of the ocean. So we went to New York. By that time, we had another singer called Ross Wiley come in, and he brought his own material. And lovely guy, and I love Ross to death, but it wasn't right for Procession, and it was going in different directions.
And was Craig Collins still with the band?
No, that's well done, because I was just about to say that we had a guy called Chris Hunt, who was Lonnie Donegan's drummer for a long time and stuff like that. Yeah, great guy, great drummer, and I played it with him later on when we did some fun pub gigs, and he said, Procession, oh my God, he said, I knew you weren't happy. I said, well, none of us were, we all wanted to do something different, but we tried to keep it going, But we sailed to New York playing on the boat, roped up the drum kit because it was flying everywhere because it was so rough, And then spent one day in New York, did a quick turnaround, and then came back, and that was it. It was bye-bye, guys.
So then you thought, what am I going to do? Go back to Oz?
I wanted to go back to Oz. I always thought England's my home.
Yeah.
And I always thought that I would come back, and I came back from leaving 2 great bands. Bulldog, we formed Bulldog with Bob and Pete Miles, Bob Dames on bass, and they were lovely players, and we had such a great band because
it was a different sound, wasn't it? It was more hard-edged.
It was a 3-piece hard-edged sound, but we do Schizoid Man. I mean, we played that thing, which is one of the hardest things, but we learnt it, and we played it before anybody else really had heard it, because things weren't getting through like it is now. There's no internet and no mobiles and stuff. So they thought, oh my God, this is different, you know. So it was great.
So how long was it? Because Mike Hugg obviously had the producing role with Procession in England.
Yeah.
So he kind of took Collins to Chapter 3.
Yeah.
So when did he approach you, or how did it come that you actually hooked up with Manfred Mann?
When Bulldog broke up, I had a phone call. Well, I broke it up. It's my fault. Absolutely. We were at some sort of record reception from the Fable label, which was kind of a big label in Australia. I was once managed by Mike Gudinski too, who passed away not too recently, but he was a great manager, and also Glenn Wheatley too. There were some great people in Australia, and you knew it was only a matter of time before these people broke through internationally, and sure enough they did, you know.
Yeah.
And where were we? Yeah, Mike Hugg. Manfred wanted to break away from the Chapter 3 thing, wanted to form a more rocky band, and Mike Hugg, bless him, suggested that he's looking for a singer-guitarist, not the other way around.
Yeah.
And I'm not that. I'm a guitarist singer. I've always said that. You know, I'm not Chris Thompson. I do my thing. I sing my thing, and I can do it fine. But I'm not the great voice. But I do the guitar thing. So anyway, but Manfred was looking for a singer. Suggested me, so bought me a ticket back. I left Bulldog. I didn't know what was going to happen. I might not be accepted by Manfred. To this day, I've never been asked to join the band. You know, I'm still waiting. You know, and then I came back New Year's Day. It must have been 1970 or 71. He'd already found a rhythm section in Chris Slade and Colin Patton, and I think they knew each other. Chris had finished with Tom Jones in Vegas, and he was in a band called Tomorrow with Olivia Newton-John, which didn't go anywhere really. So they were fantastic. I mean, I can't say highly enough about those guys. So it was great. Manfred and me, New Year's Day, got round a piano. I still had jet lag, you know. And he had this about half a dozen tunes. One of them, Ashes to the Wind. Gonna build a fire, gonna light up the moon. You know that one.
Yeah.
I can't sing it in full voice. Gonna build us a fire, gonna light up the blue. You know it. Sorry about that. Yeah. And so I was singing to his piano playing. And then there was another tune. I bought Pete Miles, the drummer of Bulldog, introduced me to Jerry Hahn's Brotherhood, which was a fantastic album. And the tunes were written by a guy called Lane Teagan, apart from a couple of jazz classics they did. One of those songs was Captain Bobby Stout. The other one was Martha's Madman. There was three. What was the three? Can't remember at the moment, but there was three from that album that I brought back to England. And Manfred said, "Oh, they're pretty good tunes, you know." But this came later. Anyway, we sat around, and there was Father a Day. So it was the way that Bob Dylan did. I do this on stage now sometimes. Father and night, Father and day, Father and day, the darkness away, Father and day. You know, he did it at that tempo. And I said, why don't you slow it down? Because of the song, he said, oh yeah. Well, I was going to do that anyway, you know, Manfred being Manfred. I said, I'll get my guitar out. He said, oh yeah, well, you might as well. So then I said, let's run that by me again, you know. And then I eventually found it.
And
that goes
never
well.
Looked back since.
Father and night, Father and day, Father, you take. Yeah. And then we work on the arrangement. And then we got together in. He said, "Oh, you play." He said, I didn't realise. I went on a dodgy acoustic. He said, "Yeah, well, we can use that." Yeah.
So that was great fun, yeah?
I don't know if this sounds any good through the camera, but there you
That'd
go.
be okay,
Yeah. And then we got together at a place called, was it the Lower Earth or something Earth in Covent Garden, the rehearsal room. And I'll never forget that first rehearsal. We played a couple of things and it just locked. It just happened. And we all went, all right.
So when did you decide on the name of Manfred Mann Earth Band? Because it wasn't like that at the beginning, was it?
Manfred's done an interview recently. It wasn't the marquee one. It was another interview. I didn't see who the interviewer was. I think it was recorded at the Workhouse. But we went through some different names, you know, like what do we have?
Elastic Band, wasn't it?
Elastic Band and all that, you know. And we, oh yeah, Earth Band, that sounds pretty cool. And I'm not sure if, I remember it as us deciding on it. We did a gig in Ireland and Taste was on there, Roddy Gallagher's Taste. I remember that. And we were coming back on the plane and we sort of all sitting close together. And we said, look, we've got to get this name sorted. And I think by the end of the flight, Manfred said, yeah, Earth Band it is.
Okay. And you went on to record 6 fantastic albums in that
yeah, I mean,
in a short space of time.
Yeah, I mean, Procession recording that album and then going back a bit in England, but I can't listen to it. I can't listen to it, bless him, because it just wasn't right. It had nothing to do with Mike Hugg because I wanted to do an album with Mike Hugg, and later on it was suggested that myself, Manfred, and Mike do something, and then Mike wanted to join, form a jazz fusion thing, and we got together for a couple of gigs. But then Earth Band overtook that, you know, so we went out on the road. But there is a story about the Earth Band. We were booked to play, I'm not sure if it was a week or 10 days in a club in Rome, and that was our very first gig. And we weren't sure how it was going to go. We were very confident. And I remember us starting up with Dealer. And of course, people expected, there she was, just walking down the street, you know, and we ended up, go. Dealer, dealer, treat me right. Then I was tonight. And I think that was a Mike Hugg tune, or it was classic black, I don't know, it's a bit sketchy, but yeah, there you go. And the first night, fine, small audience, went down okay. Second night, larger audience, you know. By the end of the week, we were packing out the place, and we fantastic. Went, this is for us, you know.
And how did you get on such big stages with Deep Purple, for example, in Australia?
Yeah. We were on the same record company as, we were on the same record company. Well, that was later on when we worked with Uriah Heep. We were on the Bronze label, and then in America, Warner Brothers. I'm not sure how that came about, but that first tour that we did in Australia was, they had a local band, I think they're called The Questions, I think so, or something else, yeah. And then it was us, still called Manfred Mann, as it happens. And then it was Free and Deep Purple. Well, those were big guys, you know. And we would go down, our attitude was, we're going to show people what, it really was, we're going to show people what we're made of here, you know.
Yeah, fantastic.
And we were so confident, not big time, but inbuilt confidence, which you should have, you got to have. And we went on, and it was fantastic. We ended up Free not doing one show in Melbourne, and it was just us and Purple. And we also came back to Australia headlining. And that was pretty cool as well. We had a great time doing that. We weren't getting the crowds that, you know, that Free and Deep Purple. But I remember us playing in a place called Randwick Racecourse, and lots of people come on the Earthband website now and they say what a great gig that was, and they were particularly fond of Manfred Mann. We went down a storm, you know. But there was our manager at that time. The tour was promoted by a guy called Sammy Lee.
Okay.
He passed away, and he was a gangster. Basically, the tour was run by gangsters, and there was heavy-looking guys sort of all around us all of a sudden. And then we were asked to do an extra show with Purple. Free didn't do it. In Melbourne, I said, we want you to do an extra show in Festival. But the thing was, I don't think we were getting paid for it. So I said, oh, do an extra show, but you won't necessarily get paid for it. You know, it was one of them. And our manager refused. He was beaten up in a hotel room. And we heard all this going on. And, you know, we went, you could have seen us at breakfast white as sheets, you know, because we felt scared. Yeah. I even felt scared for my in-laws, who at that time lived in Australia. And these guys were heavy guys, I'm sorry, you know. And we went to a lawyer, well, Manfred went to a lawyer the next morning. He said, what do we do? He said, release it to the press and have your picture taken with Sammy Lee. When he smiles, you don't smile. You know, okay. And it made the front page, it even made headlines over here in the UK. And even Deep Purple was scared for us and stuff like that. And I got really friendly with those guys, and you know Richie to this day, and Ian Gillan write to one another. You know, I never get anything back, but I always write to him. Happy birthday, Ian. Nothing back. You know, great.
So you got to play with some amazing musicians and all around the world, and the States as well, yeah?
The States was fantastic. Kiss opened up for us, their very first tour. Yeah. We got to work with Savoy Brown, who were big in the States at that time. Heap. We did all those big stadiums because we were on the same bronze label, Warner Bros. Zappa. Who else? Oh, ZZ Top, when they were Cowboys. Top, yeah. You know, when they first started to do that. All that. And they were fantastic, you know.
So you really liked the music of Frank Zappa, personally? You?
I was a big fan to the point of driving people crazy, but we were invited with our crew, because they got friendly with their crew, to go and see a rehearsal of Zappa's that he was doing. And we stood at the back, and he was playing all this stuff, impossible stuff, you know, George Duke, all those guys, Chester Thompson on drums, Ruth Underwood on keyboards, you know, Napoleon, what's his name, on horns and stuff, and it was great. And I thought, oh man, this is.
So was this something this music, was this something that you wanted to play with the Earth Band, or some influence that you wanted to use?
Well, that's a good question, because that eventually got me the sack from the Earth Band.
Oh.
Because I wasn't grown up enough to know that that wasn't the direction that the Earth Band guys could have wanted to go in. Okay. And they went on to have Blinded by Light and Davey, and you know, great tracks and great album with Chris. Chris came in, Dave Fleck came in, and looking back at it, not because it was successful, but purely in a musical way, I wish I had the chance to stay in the Earth Band and worked with Chris. I did later on,
Did you learn the songs, didn't you, from
Yeah.
from
Well, the thing. Yeah. Well, the thing is, it was blinded by the light, wrapped up like a deuce, another runner in the night, blinded by the light, and also Spirits was like that. Crazy day, mission man, we're back in the alley trading hands. You know, which is how I'll do it. But Manfred, you know, pulled that one apart and pulled the others apart. I recorded Spirits of the Night on the last album I did, Nightingales, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I used a guitar. Well, I'm stepping ahead now, because when I saw the rehearsals with Zappa, I thought, oh man. And I came away and I was like, oh Jesus, you know. And then we did a tour and we supported Zappa. And what happened was Tom Fowler, his bass player, I think it was wife, has got sick.
Okay.
And he had to fly back to LA, and we were, I forget where we were. It's in Zappa's book where we were, and I can't remember it. But Herb Cohen, Zappa's manager, said to Colin Patton, Earth Band's bass player, look, Frank wants a bass player for tonight. Do you want to have a go? You know, and he said, oh no. He said, I don't know Zappa's thing. He said, Mick is the fan. He said, the guitarist, and he plays bass as well, because I played double bass as well there early on. And so Herb comes over to me and he said, look, he explained the situation. He said, would you like to go? And I went, oh my God. 2 weeks earlier, I was watching them rehearse.
Yeah.
And thinking, this is the best band in the world, you know. So I said, yeah, okay.
And it went down okay, yeah?
Well, I got to rehearsals, and the first thing Frank said, he said, turn up, we can't hear you. Because I was shy about that, you know. Yeah. But he said, how much are you a fan? He said, I heard you're a fan. I said, well, I am a fan. He said, what do you know? And I said, well, you know, what do you do? He said, well, we start off with a track called Pygmy Twilight. I went, I can't play now. Yeah. I don't think I've played it since that day, so you'll have to excuse me. But I went into that, and he went, oh, you are a fan. Yeah. And played I busted, and there was one section where he danced, and all the rest of the band danced. And they did all these funny movements. I'm going, he said, just stand still, and if you want to join in, you can join in. You know, I could do my best Frank Zappa voice, but I won't bother. But the gig went great.
So after the gig, you intolerable, I suppose, a little in a small way with it.
Well, no, I was in a fog.
Yeah.
You know, I just you're right. What happened was we flew the next morning to join up with Uriah Heep, and we were gigging that night, and they were all laying around the pool, you know, and they went, oh, heard about it. So it got to them, you know, and it sort of wasn't an ego thing with me. It was a thing of, well, maybe I have a chance to do something like that, you know, maybe. And I was wrong. Because I was just wrong. And yeah, it did go to my head. But the funniest thing is Manfred's got a story that when Chris Thompson, they'd had enough of Zappa, you know. But when it came to Chris doing an audition for the band, they were in the studio, and there's a long hall that leads out to reception in Manfred's studio. And I think it was Chris Slade said, "Oh, that guy Thompson's here." He said, "Oh," he said, "Oh, right." He said, I think it was Chris. I might be wrong about this. But he said, "That's the good bit." He said, "Well, what's the bad bit?" He said, "He's wearing a Frank Zappa t-shirt." We went, "Oh, no." No. Stories like that. Great.
So,
great.
Manfred said, "We're not going to play Zappa, we're never going to do it," and that was it for you, yeah? With the Earth Band?
I can do that now. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, so that was it with the Earth Band.
Yeah, they got rid of me.
Yeah.
I went to have a meeting one day where I thought we were going to discuss what we normally discuss, new tracks or whatever, and it wasn't. They said, "Well, you've been voted out." So I packed up my Les Paul and headed on the tube. But there's another story there, is that this guy come up to me, Scottish guy, I don't know if he remembers this. Can you get on the way to the Workhouse Studios, eh? And I said, "Yeah." I said, "You get a bus, 47 bus or whatever it was, and it stops nearby outside the workhouse and stuff, and near a place called Reen's Cafe." "All right, I'll ask about it." He said, "Wait a minute, you're Mick Rogers?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "You've come for my gig." Oh man, there you go. These lovely stories.
So what was next then? You felt an urge to go back to Australia, or what did you do?
I didn't have any option. Oh, well, I say that, but then I ended up. I heard that I had an audition with Jack Bruce Band. He was looking for a guitarist. That didn't come about. Nearly did, but didn't come about. And then there was the Genesis thing. I went to, I think it was a place in St John's Wood.
Okay.
And it came down to, well, I either get a gig or I go back to Australia. And I was put up for the Genesis thing, because Peter Gabriel had just left. At that point, they haven't really chosen on Phil, even though I think it was, I'm not sure about that. I think they pretty much decided that Phil was going to be the singer. But anyway, I went along with my guitar, and I said, I'll take, because I was nervous as hell. You can imagine Mike Rutherford standing there and the guys, and Phil, who was sweet. He was fantastic. And I had to learn the album, Selling England by the Pound, which is really difficult. I mean, there's difficult passages and stuff like that. But I learned a lot of that so I could play it. But I walked in, they said, we don't need a guitarist, we're looking for a singer.
Oh.
So there again, I was lumbered with the singing thing, So me and Phil sung this, "I know what I like, and I like what I know," together, And he was singing me through it, and he said, "Oh, yeah. And there's a list. I think it's on the website.
It's on the website.
There's a list where I made the last three, So I come out close. And I think Phil later on did an interview on the BBC, and he said, "Oh, the guy that was with the Manfred Mann's Earth Band came very close." But I think they'd pretty much already decided it was Phil, and that was the right decision because he had that Gabriel inflection in his voice, but he was enough that he had his own personality, and of course he was a great frontman. And of course, phenomenal drummer.
Yeah.
I did an album called Skillingo Bay, which Phil Collins was on, and Gary Moore. I worked with John Heisman in Greenslade. I knew Dave Greenslade.
Okay.
And we'd forgotten to say that I had a band called The Impact, which came from Vision. Going back again, I'm sorry. And the producer of that was Tony Reeves,
Right.
who's a great bass player, and he was in Greenslade. But the first drum we had was Simon Phillips. So there I am, playing with Dave, Tony Reeves, Simon Phillips. I'm going, oh my God. And it was fantastic, I have to say. And then Simon didn't do all the gigs. In came John Heisman. I think Simon went on to do Jeff Becker. Along came John Heisman, who was phenomenal. And that was great too, you know. And he asked me, we were in his car going to one of the gigs, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm just forming a band called Aviator. And they were using my money, you know. I was paying the guys, not Clive Bunker, because he was already rich anyway, you know, from Jethro Hotel. Yeah. But I was paying John to stay out of the studio, Jack Lancaster, horn player. And John Heisman said, I'm thinking of, you know, I'm thinking about you for Colosseum. Because Gary looks as though he's leaving, he's doing something else. And I went, oh man, I'd love to play with you, etc. But I'd ploughed so much money into Aviator, I couldn't kiss it goodbye, you know.
So tell me about those Aviator albums. You had two fantastic, underrated albums, I must say.
The second one, Turbulence, we did as a three-piece. Jack was having mouth problems, and he was a horn player, and couldn't quite make it, you know, bless him. And he was a great player, lovely player, but couldn't quite make it at the time. And we did a second album, which I think was the best of the two, simply because it became more what we were about, you know. Yeah. And we did a couple of gigs, and it was a three-piece. But there was one gig we did, I will never forget it, and it was like a smack in the face. And we played just after midday, and people were still in their sleeping bags, I think, you know, and it wasn't great. And we went down, it was like you could hear a pin drop when you left the stage, you know. I thought, this is not right, something's wrong here. And I got back to the hotel. We were staying at the Munich Hilton, and I think Queen were using the studio in Munich to record an album, and Mr. May was sitting there in reception. I sort of introduced myself. I said, my name's Mick, blah blah blah. And, oh right, okay. And he was sweet. Brian May's the sweetest guy, you know, very shy and stuff like that. And I said, he said, how did it go? I said I played a gig previous. He said, how did it go? I said, it went awful, it was crap. I said, we came off to silence. He said, well, we've all had that in the past. You know, and I don't know whether he was joking or not. No, I don't know if he would remember that, but he was sweet. I think he tried to, you know, say, oh, don't worry about it. And then I had thinking, I thought, we got on there and we played stuff that no one knew, you know, and it just wasn't the thing to do. From then on, I said, right, I'm never going to go that route again. Sod all this writing songs for yourself and doing it live. What's the point in that? You can do it if the album sells, because people know what you're talking about. But it was awful, and big lesson learned, you know.
But it was kind of a supergroup, yeah, in the technical term of supergroup, you know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I suppose, but not super songs.
Not super.
I mean,
songs.
some of it lives up. You know, we saw Close Encounters, and I immediately went back to my place and wrote a thing about the UFOs. You know, oh God, you know. But it stands up. It stands up.
So during this time, you were still following the Earth Band, of course, their progress.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
You occasionally went to some concerts.
I saw a gig at a college, and I can't remember what it was. It was quite a drive, I know that, and it was great. And I saw them. And yeah, they were really great, you know, really good. And then further on, well, no, there's no point in that, is there? Because where are we now?
But you're collaborating with Manfred on Runner, for example.
I actually played and sung on every album, only to the point sometimes of going, bop, ba 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 ba. Oh yeah, BVs. You know what I mean? Yeah. Big time. And that was fine because. And I was still communicating with him, you know. And I was in Australia, and we used to get the Billboard magazine. In those days, it was the Bible to see what was happening in the charts in America. And I could see blindly going, dun, dun, dun. And I'm going,
yeah,
maybe I made the right choice, wrong choice here, you know. But you know,
but you were collaborating and playing guitar on some songs.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I saw them at the Dominion, and they were recording live, and I could see it wasn't right. I could see there were more effects than there was actually music, and I thought, no, this is, you know, you'd see lights going round and there'd be things going off. Lots of pyros, you know, and also I thought the music was getting drowned by the effects. It sort of overtook it. And although the songs were still great, you know. So I went to see the guys after the show, and I thought, what do I say, you know? I went up the stairs. Mr. John Lingwood was coming down the stairs, and he said, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, look at my watch, it's not a lot, why? Writing, practicing or whatever, you know, practice some frags up. And I said, no, why? He said, I think Manfred wants you in the studio. And so I played the bass, and the first thing I did was Runner, and I played the bass on Runner. I did the BVs and some lines with Chris. And they started talking about the European tour, and they said, you know, yeah, you're back in.
Oh, fantastic.
Although I've never been asked by Manfred, I might ask him next weekend when I see him. Can I join the band there? You know. That was a good moment.
And you've not looked back since. I mean, selling out concerts all around Europe.
Yeah, I mean, it was sad because when I went back to Australia each time, I had two great bands, Bulldog, and then later on a band called Eclipse, which with three guys who could really play fusion. You know what I mean? I was in there as a fan, and we did some things, and some of the stuff was quite outrageous. But I mean, we did. We would start off. Now I remember we did Monash Uni, and it was a regular gig, but it was a lunchtime. And we started off. In a white room with black curtains, here's a station. You know, we went into Cream, and
Cream
just went,
fantastic. Yeah.
What? And then we'd go into these lines, you know, which we'd written, and it was different. But we'd use, the trick is not to steer away too much from what people don't know.
Yeah.
And in my own show, of course, I'll be delving on Earthband stuff, even though I'll do my own arrangements of those things. I mean, it's just me and a guitar. I will be using, but we'll go on about that later on, you know, using some backing tracks and stuff.
Yeah, so you've had a great, well, since I think 1985 when you got back into the band and did Criminal Tango album.
Yeah.
And ever since, not too many albums recorded, but a great live band.
I mean, if the band had their way, we'd be doing an album every 15 months or something. Yeah. But Manfred's not like that. You know, he wants everything to be so perfect. So, and in his own admittance, we've had this conversation many a time, and it's not a put down. But he doesn't listen to music like a lot of people do. I mean, I said to him, I said, hey, I'm still, because I'm a rockabilly at heart. Sorry about that. I'm a rockabilly at heart, you know, and I love all that stuff. If I could play that stuff on a regular basis, not my main thing, but some of that, which I will be doing actually now, I'd be well happy. But I said to Manfred, I said, look, do you ever listen to the 50 stuff and the Little Richard stuff and all that? He said, yeah, but he said, I keep hearing the hi-hat out of time.
Yeah.
I said, well, on a Little Richard thing with wonderful drummer, you know. He said, yeah. So, you know, he's...
So now we're in a position where you're planning your future and you want to play this rockabilly and guitar, and you've got a brand new website that's just come live this month.
Yeah,
the 6th
I mean,
of August.
If I can go back just a little bit over the last 18 months or so, I was very fortunate in having a friend called Colin Newman, who was Jeff Beck's manager. And he takes care of Ozzy Osbourne and, you know, the Brummie set, as we would say. And I was still in contact with Colin because we worked years before, and when I was writing songs. And he said, send me some stuff. So I sent him this instrumental called Start Your Engines, which I actually wrote with Jeff Beck in mind.
Right.
You know. You've heard it, haven't you? It's very much that, because, you know, I put rockabilly phrases in. Every night you hear me with Earthbound, I play rockabilly phrases and stuff, and I love melodies. That's where I come from, melodies. Instead of going, you know, I'll go, you know, I prefer that, and I'm better at that. You know,
okay.
I'm not a, you know, but I'm not the expert that, you know.
But you do have your three solo albums. Back to Earth, I think, 2002.
Yeah, Back to Earth. Digressing a bit, I got together, I was invited, he sent a couple of things to Jeff Beck. He sent them Cutting Me to Pieces, which was on my album. And he loved them. And he said, so Colin said, is it okay if Mick comes to your place and you get together and get to know each other? So he said, yeah. So I went over there. It was Valentine's Day. I think it was the year before COVID hit, in fact. And there was another thing where, you know, and he had his famous white Strat on the sofa. And so I'm using this guitar. And he said, oh, play things. So I went... He said, oh, yeah, right. And that's a song he recorded with John McLaughlin. And it's a beautiful tune, originally done by MJQ, Modern Jazz Quartet. Yeah. He said, oh, you know that stuff? I said, yeah. Man. So he made copious amounts of cup of tea, you know, and showed me his cards, which I'd seen before, because years previous, a guy who was Lance Miles was Jeff's tech. Yeah. In fact, he was Terry Bozzio's tech, the famous drummer. And he said, I played a lot of tennis in those days, and Lance said, Jeff was holding a tennis tournament at his house. So I met him before. In fact, I knocked him out of the tournament, and he said, oh, congratulations, you bastard. So, you know. So we had a jam that night as well, you know, and the first thing we did was green. Green Onions, you know. We went, oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
You know. And Jimmy Copley was there, who was who'd known Jeff since school days, or the end of school days, you know. Yeah. So grew up with Jeff. So it was a lovely day. And then I was invited to the house, and Sandra was there. It was Valentine's Day, and the first thing I said, don't worry, I haven't bought you any flowers or anything. He said, oh, thank God for that, you know. And we had a great day. And I did the last session, and I've got it on my phone, and no one's going to hear it, blah, 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 commercially, that Jeff had a record in the studio, which was Lucille, because I'd done a rockabilly album with the guys that Jeff uses for his rockabilly thing, apart from Paul Beavis on drums, and they can play that stuff. It was I must mention their names because they're so important to me. Paul Beavis on drums, Ian Jennings on bass. You don't get any better than Ian. And Ben Waters on piano, who plays rockabilly piano. I mean, you've heard the tracks, and they're insanely good, these guys. Yeah. And we recorded at Echo Town in Dorchester. And if anybody wants to record anywhere, Echo Town is just so lovely. Lovely people. Anyway, I digress. Next question.
Well, I was going to ask you about the 2 albums you did.
Yeah.
The early ones in 2002 and 2003.
Yeah.
Where you did the Father of Day, let's say EP.
Yeah, I mean, Father of Day's lived with me and still does. And that's, you can't knock it. I mean, I think it was Mark Knopfler said one time that when he formed his new band, when Dire Straits had broken up, he said, you've got to do your diamonds. You've got to do what people come pay the ticket to hear, even if you do different versions. And so Father of Day's had different versions, you know. I recorded it on Back to Earth, as well as Johnny Kidd tunes, a couple of Johnny Kidd tunes, who I love.
I think they're both fantastic albums and very diversified sound on them. But something slightly different came with Sharabang.
Sharabang was financed by guys in Swarovski, who are the jewellery people, and the son, Gerhard, he financed the whole album and spent an awful lot of money. He flew Greg Bissonette, and a wonderful keyboard player, and Matt Bissonette over, and I to Austria from the States. And we had these guys. I did the backing tracks and then played it to them. Then we put them on live. And these guys, again, top of the game. You know, they're session guys, as well as Greg now plays with Luke in Lukather and Ringo's band. So, and just lovely people, you know. And so I mean, but again, I did covers.
Someone telling you to do something you didn't want to do.
Well, Greg,
kind of a
Greg,
theme.
yeah, I was sitting next to Jimmy Copley on the tour bus. We were travelling to a gig, and Greg rang me up from the studios, and he said, "Is that Mick?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "There's Greg." I went, "Oh, Greg Bissonette, man." So I put the phone down. I went, "Greg Bissonette." To Jimmy Copley, he's gone. You know, and he said, "Oh, I want to play with you. I want to do some stuff." And he'd heard Cutting Me to Pieces, and he said, "Oh man," he was into King's X.
King's X, yeah.
Yeah, he was into that band, and he said, "I want to do something like that, you know, with you." It never came about because when he heard the backing tracks, and I did things like the Steve Miller thing, Joker, and listen to the music, and I thought, wow, I enjoyed it working with those guys, and the Swarovski guys. Gerhard was lovely, you know, and I got to work with Chuck Ainley, who was the #1 engineer in Nashville, and he worked with George Strait, and he worked with Dolly Parton, Chet Atkins, and all these guys, and he was actually Mark Knopfler's engineer.
Yeah.
So he knew everything about guitar sounds, and the album, I have to say, it sounds great, but it's not what I wanted to do. And even Greg said to me, he said, "Why are you doing these songs?"
But eventually you got a chance to do what you want to do with Bad Apples, yeah?
The Bad Apples was the band. I mean, Jimmy got very sick and passed away. It was basically his band. It was one of those bands where it was Mickey Moody on guitar, slide as well as, you know, guitar, and put 2 guitarists together, and it can be an absolute mess. You know, disaster. But me and Mickey worked so well together because we're 2 different players. He stayed out of my way, I stayed out of his way. When it came together, we played for one another, and it was great. Ian Jennings again on bass, and Robert Hart was singing. I was doing some singing. Mickey did some singing. We never got to where the band should have been because it had the opportunity to be amazing. We never got there because Jimmy, bless him, passed away. Yeah. And none of us wanted to take up the mantle after that because it was Jimmy's band.
It was Jimmy's band, yeah.
Yeah, and that was it. It was the end of a thing. But we became the backing band for Paul Jones's charity.
At Guildford, playing at Guildford.
Yeah, previous to that, I forget the name of the place. Oh, sorry, I forget the name of the place now. That's where Ringo lived. And friends of mine live. Oh my God! Anyway.
Cranley? No, not Cranley.
Cranley, well done.
Yeah.
Cranley, yeah, Cranley Arts Centre, which was a small place. We'd do 2 nights there back in, and Eric came along, Mr. Clapton, because he only lived a couple of miles down the road and played with us, and that was fun. It's on film, in fact. That was lovely. And then I got to do G Live. That gig moved to G Live, which is the big place in Guildford, with 1,500 people. It was a different kind of vibe. Paul Jones rang me up and he said, "I'd love you to come down and play." He said, "What are you doing on January 6th or whatever?" I said, "I'm cool. There's not a lot happens in January anyway." He said, "Okay." He said, "Come along and play." I said, "Okay, I'll be there and rehearse with the band." I said, "What are they going to do?" He said, "No." He said, "What are you going to do?" He said, "You rehearse what you want to do with the band." So now I had that bang. I said, "No, I'll do it on my own." I said, "I'll get out and play on my own. Just me and the guitar."
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, fantastic." He said, "That cuts down rehearsal time and everything like that." He said, "Do that country thing you do." I said, "What?" He said, "That hillbilly thing you did." Hillbilly? Sorry. That Cannonball Rag.
Yeah.
So I said, "Yeah, I'll do that." And I said, "Who's on the show?" Because he never advertises who's on the show, you see. And that's, he sells tickets that way, because he knows it's always going to be quality people,
Yeah.
And then I said, "Who's on it?" He said, "Oh, after you will be Eric." I went, "Oh, right." I said, "Burden," who I worked with previously. He said, "No, Mr. Clapton." I went, "Huh." I said, "Who after it?" He said, "Van." I said, "Oh, Van. There's only one Van. It's Van Morrison." I said, "Well, who's headlining?" He said, "Tom Jones." So I went, let's take this from the top. I said, "You got Ronnie Scott's Blues Band, with some great players, and then little old Mick Rogers from down there in Weybridge, and then Eric Clapton, Matt Morrison, Tom Jones." He
All
said,
superstars.
"Yeah." Oh, and oh my God. Anyway, it was fantastic. And I've done that a couple of years now.
And you want to do more of this?
Oh, yeah. I wanted to do that. And Paul said, "You should do this. You should do this." Yeah. And I said, "Yeah, well, I'll try and do it." It's having the opportunity. And from there, it sort of flourished to a bigger idea. And I'm working with Pete Dutton, bless his heart, this great sound guy with the Earth Band, and he's mixed so many great people. And if you like, he's the man for me out front.
Yeah.
He's the guy. So it really is like
So fast forwarding now to just a few years, not too many years.
Yeah.
From those.
I think we covered in the past.
Yeah. Exactly. I really want to talk about what your plans are for the future, Mick, and how you see things going. I mean, you've got a new website, as I mentioned. You have some gigs I noticed in Oslo coming up next.
Yes, we're kicking off some gigs in Norway next April. We can't do anything previous to that. I mean, if I'm asked to do G Live again, then of course that would be fantastic. But I mean, that's me saying that now, for God's sake. I mean,
but you're working on some new music for a new album?
Yeah, there's. I'm doing an album simply called The Guitarist, and it's got instrumentals on. It's got tunes. Yeah, I won't say too much about the tunes until they work out. But yeah, I'm also. Yeah, I can't say too much about the other thing with the production thing, but yeah, and I have to say that the guy that I've done a couple of duo gigs with, and we are doing Little Dumbo on 20th of September, which is my birthday actually, and with Robert Hart. Me and Robert are doing that duo gig together, and he's been really helpful with me. He's a great mate and stuff like that. So, and he's introduced me to a couple of really important people, which I can't go into until if and when it happens, and it's all part of what we plan, you know. Yeah, so I'm excited about that.
So can we expect to see some a CD next year sometime, maybe? Yeah, and maybe hear some of the songs live. Yeah, some of the stuff you're working on.
Yeah, definitely. I won't, although I'll just be up there with the guitar. I'm not going to use a looper like someone like the great. I'm a big fan of Ed Sheeran. I think what he does is, you know, fantastic, really.
Yeah.
And I'm also, my taste of music spreads from stuff in the late 40s, 50s, all the way through, right up until now. And I'm going to shock people with what I say now. I think Taylor Swift is great.
Yeah.
I think what she does is, you know, a 3.5 hour show with just her. You gotta say, look, fair dues. But I also like Prodigy. So how do you knit that together?
You're going to do a show that is rock guitar through from the 50s up to modern day?
Yeah, I'm going to do some rockabilly stuff. I hope to be playing better than what I am today. You know, well, definitely, you know. But I mean, also, you know, I love all the Shadow stuff. And I played some Shadow stuff with Mr. Beck as well, because he was a big fan. You know, but when we played, you know, something else. You know, it's very subtle things what Bruce does. I mean, I'm not a name dropper. I mean, I said the Sting. I mean, as the last, I don't do that. But I know Bruce, and when Bruce plays, he doesn't play. Nah, it's not done like that. It's it's done with feel, you know. But when Beck played the FBI. You know, he plays it his own way. It's great. Yeah. It's still Hank, but it's, you know.
That's fantastic, Mick. I mean, that's given the audience great insight to your career.
Especially me playing that. To pick my toilet. I'm sorry about that.
No.
Another thing that's happened. I'm a little pimp with my hair gas back, a pair of khaki pants and my shoes shine back. I mean, Hot Rats, what an album, you know,
Fantastic.
Another thing I'd like to add, and you can edit this out and do what you like. I was able to do a tour with Steve Lukather where we did a Jimi Hendrix.
Experience.
Yeah, it really was an experience, you know, with Tony McAlpine, who's like, forget it, he's off the planet. But he was a child prodigy as a classical pianist. So you used to sit, if there was a piano backstage, you go like, and we go, oh my God, you know. And I have to say, I have to mention this, I got 3 sons and a daughter, but I got Sean, who doesn't play anything. He was a pearl diver in Australia for years, and there was Oliver, who plays nice rhythm guitar, and I hear the trailer coming round the bend. He does all that, you know. But my son George is like, I mean, I shy away from saying how good your son is because I don't want to become one of those dads who's a bloody bore. But I played with him the other night and jamming some stuff, and he's playing this Blue Ronde la Turque by Dave Brubeck, and anyone that knows keyboards or anything knows that's a difficult thing to play. He's playing this, he's still only 17.
Yeah.
I love him to death, and I'm going to have him on my album. We're doing a track called Privateers together, which you've heard.
Yes,
he's
absolutely
insane.
fantastic.
He's insane.
It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
To hear that is something completely different.
Yeah. So he's on there. But thanks for today. It's been great, you know, and I hope I haven't jabbered on too much.
No, I think we could listen to you all day, Mick.
Pygmy Twilight.
Mick, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, and I look forward to
so
the
much
gigs.
for
I
coming.
look forward to next year.
Yes, thank you very much.
Whatever. Yeah, thank you.